Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Pure Joy Podcast. And welcome on YouTube if you're watching. I'm your host, Elena Love, and today I'm here with Michael Kuenning. Hi, Michael.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So this is going to be the first of many. Michael is, well, you're many things. He's a registered nurse as a living, but also what I consider to be a medicinal mushroom expert. And whenever we're together at a party or just anywhere where there's other people, he'll start talking about mushrooms, and everybody just... What? Like something about like your knowledge and how you share it is just really fascinating. And for those who are new to the medicinal mushroom scene, it's kind of been growing over the years for sure. Mm-hmm. And basically, medicinal mushrooms are absolutely fabulous. And so Michael's just here today to talk to us a little bit about the different types of mushrooms, how they work in your body, and explaining it in a way that like lay people can get. Because a lot of times people start to go really over your head with the information. So I guess let's start with how you got into mushrooms and why you love them so much.
Yeah, I don't know how I got into mushrooms. I just, at some point, I started hijacking my life. I think I've always been a do-it-yourselfer. And so when it comes to particularly things involving food and nutrition and stuff like that, even if it's something like bread or kombucha or beer or something like that, I always like to explore how to make it yourself. Same thing with, foods. If I want to go, wildcraft something or make my own medicines. And so I think it's kind of that original genesis. That's part of the genesis there. I also distinctly remember being a child and seeing mushrooms in the yard, and I would want to go touch them and play with them. My parents would be like, no, don't do that. They're poisonous. Yeah, you can't. Don't play with those. Don't touch those. And then so there's always kind of been this allure with, like, what is it? Like, why can't I touch it?
Right.
What's wrong with it?
Of course, we want the things we're not supposed to have.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And then so in my early 20s there, I started getting involved in going mushroom foraging. And then, because sometimes you find mushrooms that you don't know what they are, and then a lot of the fun is getting a guidebook and figuring out what you found. And, sometimes maybe they're not like a real delicious edible mushroom, but they got a lot of medicinal compounds to it.
Right.
You're like, oh, well, let's explore this a little bit more and make my own medicine and make my own supplements and take it in whatever way I can, or make my own tea or what have you. And then from there, you get interested in, cultivating different types, and that's a really amazing world, because there's been a real kind of blooming of that field, all kind of sponsored by your citizen scientists, as they call them.
Right.
The way that mushrooms are cultivated in the U.S. and is almost entirely all hobbyist. So a lot of the techniques that we've developed are all kind of fueled by your hobbyists, and there's been a real resurgence of that in the last 10 years. So.
Okay. Yeah, and so my first foray into medicinal mushrooms was through Reishi mushroom. And what's interesting about medicinal mushrooms is there's things like Reishi and Chaga that you can't get anything out of without heat extracting and alcohol extracting. But so I feel like, and even David Wolf has called Reishi the king of mushrooms, but some people argue Chaga's the king, but I think they're very similar in some ways, but very unique in different ways. So maybe let's just start there with talking about those two, because they seem to be the most well-known of all the mushrooms. Mm-hmm. But then I want to definitely get into your favorite, which I know is cordyceps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see. Reishi is a very time and tested mushroom. It is of course, a beta-glucan powerhouse, and is chock full of all sorts of antioxidants and stuff like that. And it's also been attributed to long life. It's been called the elixir of long life, or elixir of eternal life. Mm-hmm. And it's actually named after an emperor that used to take it pretty religiously, consumed very large amounts of it. It is. I think it's a good idea to take it daily as a supplement. What we start kind of seeing is it's a very good idea to get a kind of a blend of them going. Maybe not even necessarily pick out one better than the other, or one being superior, but to get a variety in whatever way that we can,
Okay.
and what's available, and then navigating the markets or navigating what they get can actually be quite the quagmire.
See, and that's where you come in. But so like whenever you come to visit me, I know you've got your jar of powdered reishi and your jar of powdered chaga, and just like because you've been in the trenches with COVID. I mean, you've been in the belly of the beast down in San Francisco and these places where there was like a lot going on, and like tell them like what you were telling me the other day about like why you take your medicinal mushrooms, like so much of it.
Yeah, it's one of the more famous compounds in medicinal mushrooms that a lot of people are familiar with are the beta-glucans, which is a fungal sugar which is responsible for, or which, helps us bolster our immune systems. I largely attribute, I remember when the first COVID cases came into the U.S. and into Oregon and working with those here in Oregon. And I've been working with COVID pretty intimately for the last year, and I largely attribute my health through the taking of medicinal mushrooms.
Yeah. And I took them when you were here, and I told you that I noticed like I got all this energy. It was almost like too much because I just took a huge dose. But like I felt the energy in those powders. And now powders are different than tinctures. And am I right by saying the beta-glucans are in the powder but not in the tincture?
They can be present in the tinctures too.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
the beta-glucans are water soluble. So.
Okay. And then so you have to like heat extract mushrooms, which a lot of people don't understand about mushrooms. They think, oh, they can just buy a ground up powder, which I see a lot. Oh, I got my chaga mushrooms here, but you look at the package and there's nothing about heat extraction. So that's just like eating fiber at that point, right? Yeah,
kind of. So a lot of the goodies made by mushrooms are contained within the cell walls of the fungus, the actual cells of it, and that can be the cell walls are actually really difficult for our digestive systems to break down. It's made out of the compound called chitin, which is a really tough substance. It's kind of like a fingernail. Or the shell, it's the same material as the shell of like a crustacean or like a shrimp or like an insect exoskeleton.
Right.
And so the tendency is for it to just slide right past through the GI tract.
So you're not even, it's just wasted money.
Yeah, pretty much. You want all mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms should be cooked, and culinary mushrooms should be cooked.
Yeah.
Because the heat process actually helps break down those chitin cell walls so that our bodies are able to absorb the product.
Yeah, okay, so like let's just keep going on reishi and chaga, which I feel like are unique to things like other things like turkey tail and cordyceps, because when you find them in the forest, they're like hard and shiny and like there's no way any teeth would get through that. Like there's no, it's not like, oh, I found a delicate little like lion's mane to chomp on.
Yeah.
Like
they have to be processed.
And do you know anything about, like, I know especially with, I'm not sure about reishi, but I know with chaga, it's almost like a tuber or wound on the side of the tree.
It almost looks like a giant wart.
Is it the oak tree?
No, it's the birch tree.
Birch tree. And so, like, they're saying, like, it's extracting a lot of the power from the tree. And so is that why, like, those mushrooms are so powerful, because they're like, growing on the tree?
Yeah, they'll take they grow parasitically, and so they'll grow and take a lot of the nutritional aspects that the tree's made for itself in the form of sugars and things like that, and then convert them into all sorts of different goodies like the beta-glucans and, of course, a wide range of very potent antioxidants as well.
Awesome. Okay. So then you prefer powder of the chaga and reishi, I see.
Yeah, I prefer almost always dry powder extracts of the mushrooms. Yeah. Tinctures are very convenient because they're just easy to take. And I think if it comes down to consuming a large amount of pills or powders or just encapsulated powders, or dissolving large amounts of powder into like a beverage, if that's not convenient for you, then it's more preferable to take the tincture, because it's compliance with taking it is probably, it's better to take something than nothing at all.
Exactly.
So.
And so one more question before we move on to some other kinds of mushrooms and stuff is the tincture. I'm hearing that the best way with medicinal mushrooms is two forms of extraction. One is heat extraction through cooking it, boiling it down. Second is alcohol extraction.
And then alcohol extraction.
Yeah, so like, I know you said both of them have the beta-glucans, but like, what is there like a difference? Is it good to take both, or you said powders, but like, why? What's the difference?
Yeah. So we'll start with just kind of tinctures versus powders. So with the powders, you're usually consuming the entire fruiting body. Even with the tinctures, after they've been processed, some of the fungal material gets removed, so it can all just be in a fluid. If you take like a 1-to-1 dry powder extract, it's full spectrum. Not that the tinctures aren't, but they just end up getting more material. And I really truly believe that like mushrooms are like food, Hippocrates, like food be thy medicine, medicine be thy food. It's like mushrooms are like a food source. And so they're medicinal food. So when you start taking and removing a lot of the mushroom material, you start pulling inevitably some of the goodies and some of the nutritional or some of the medicinal compounds out of it. Not that a lot of tinctures can't be potent. They absolutely, most certainly can.
But that makes sense to me now, because I've never heard anybody explain it in that way before. I just thought, oh, maybe I need to be doing both. So that totally makes sense, because like we always talk about that your body should taste things. Your tongue should taste things so your body knows what it's receiving. So the same with that. Like, I mean, Reishi and Chaga are a little bit bitter, but your body knows what's coming.
Right. Yeah, and so usually when you buy powders, like the bulk powders, they're kind of hard to take because they taste bad. So it's, you can encapsulate them too. That help kind of get past that. And then, then there's also different types of dry powder extracts as well. This is another reason why navigating medicinal mushroom supplements can be so tricky. But you also have like 2-to-1 powdered extracts. And so usually what happens there is, let's say that we're just doing a hot water extraction, and we take the mushroom material, we blend it into a powder, and then we boil it, and then we cheesecloth a certain amount of it off. If it's 2-to-1, you remove half of the fungal material and throw it away and put the other back in as a filler, and then you dehydrate all the water out. That's fine if you're looking to isolate your beta-glucans. That's an okay way to do it, but you will also be throwing out whatever a lot of the fat-soluble stuff that's still present in that the material that we removed. So I prefer a mushroom supplement that's full spectrum.
So that's 1-to-1. You should say 1-to-1.
What I just described is a 2-to-1.
Right.
So but the full spectrum where it's just kind of the churned processed mushroom material and then dehydrated again.
Yeah.
It's 1-to-1, but it's
Okay. And one more question on that. I had a guy, this is before I knew much, and he was just selling all these mushrooms, and he was charging like $200 a bottle for like a 20-to-1, and it was a mix of things. So basically there was very little fiber in that, and it was mostly just the dehydrated liquid, right?
Yeah, I'd have to take a look at it because there's so many different ways to do these things.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why this is so tricky to navigate.
And it is tricky.
So it's like, is that a concentrated water extract? And then what is the mushroom? And then what is the desirable compound we're trying to get out of that particular mushroom? If say that you're only looking to get like cordycepin out of cordyceps and you're not interested in the beta-glucans, then maybe a certain processing method is more preferable to you. If you're trying to just get a large amount of that particular compound, and you're not worried about the beta, or maybe you're only worried about the beta-glucans and not worried about the cordycepin.
So
and you
can you talk to us about the cordycepin? I mean the beta-glucans, because like I'm hearing that word and I'm like, I know it's good for me, but why is it good and why would I not want it or versus want it?
Well, there's no reason, in my opinion, not to take it. As far as as long as you're a healthy individual that's open to taking these supplements. But it's kind of the classic chemical when people go to and start, when we think of medicinal compounds or medicinal compounds and fungi, it works as an adaptogen, and it has a very unique property in which it will bolster our immune system, making it stronger, so we can fight off diseases and things like that better. And then it will also help us reduce inflammation in our body. Okay, so I want the beta-glucans. Yes, so you like the beta-glucans. Yeah, I think it can be anti-tumor, anti-cancer. There's a lot going on with beta-glucans there. Yeah. Okay. And there's even some data that suggests that maybe as we were evolving, co-evolving with fungi, that either with it being a pathogen originally, but there's some data to demonstrate that our immune systems have evolved fairly intrinsically with the beta-glucans.
Right.
So
Okay.
there's a very unique it's a very unique chemical with the way that it hits our immune systems in the inflammation chain, with how our body responds to aggressions, to like intruders like bugs.
Yeah.
In modern medicine, we have things that can reduce inflammation very effectively, like steroids. But the problem is because the inflammatory process and the immune process are pretty much one. If we want to reduce inflammation, then what inevitably happens is we end up reducing our immune system response. So we can call inflammation off, but we end up trashing our immune systems.
It's kind of like robbing Peter to pay Paul. Like
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like and I know you're a nurse, so you can tell me or not, but with a lot of modern medicine, of course we need it when we need it, like broken bones or just punctured lungs or whatever. But a lot of it feels like it's not here to heal us, but more just to kind of fix the immediate problem. But then like a whole host of problems line up right behind it.
Yeah.
So with medicinal mushrooms and things like that, you're like actually reducing inflammation in a way that's not causing other side effects.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. And we also in modern medicine too, we can increase immune system function, but then inflammation in our body goes haywire. But with medicinal mushrooms, particularly with the beta-glucans, you can both reduce inflammation in the body, but then also increase your immune system response to things. It's almost like it's like a unicorn kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like something that you maybe wouldn't think would be possible to do, but it pulls it off.
And then so you mentioned I want to get into this a little bit because I feel like there's an energy around mushrooms that's different than any other plant on the planet. And your company is called Star Seed Fungi. And I've always heard, like, when I talk to friends and we get kind of like, start going a little to other realms, like, were mushrooms sent to us by aliens? Like, what is the deal with mushrooms and why are they here? Are they here, like, to help heal humans? And I really think that. And I love that your company's called that. But, like, what's the connection there?
Well, I've just always enjoyed the starseed myth, or the starseed story. I thought that was always kind of fun. And then the whole starseed thing being, of course, a tilt of the hat to that kind of the story that mushrooms could have possibly come from somewhere else. The spore is a very unique travel packet of DNA, and that if you wanted to preserve it, if you wanted to preserve a spore, you would actually mimic the vacuum of space. You know what I'm saying? It can last like eternally.
Really?
Yeah, and then it's radiation resistant, pressure resistant, cold resistant, and then also just with the size of the spore too, it's able to to just essentially suspend in our air and make it really, really close to the farthest out reaches of our atmosphere, where it can get wicked off and blown out into space. So it's kind of another cool thing kind of think about is there's actually suspended above us at all time a whole genetic library of all sorts of different fungal DNA swirling around us, encapsulating the planet, that any time can come down and seed different things. So it's just it's all part of a super, super cool system. So
it super is. And like, so you're talking about air, but I know like the mycelium that grows underground is like it's so unique, and it's kind of almost similar to trees in the way that information travels. So to me, when I think about medicinal mushrooms, I think about information and like even how you're saying like that they're in the air, but like it's a way of like the whole forest, the mushrooms create that the whole forest becomes like interconnected and intercommunicative. And
the mycelial mats, and there's many different species of fungus that will do this, but connects the roots of pretty much all the plants in the forest, diverting resources from one particular plant to another. And it's been pretty well demonstrated. So, I always call them the kind of the fungal overlords of the forest. With even there's certain mushrooms that will take down many acres of trees. The honey mushroom, and it will parasitize many acres of trees, and those trees will fall and make way for grassland where the hoofed animals like deer,
the meadows,
elk,
basically.
yeah, exactly. And then so it kind of sculpts our forests.
I've always wondered how meadows, I'm like, how does this meadow appear in the middle of a forest? And do you think it's from the mushrooms?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes.
That's super awesome.
Sometimes, clear cutting or,
well, depends.
Boulders running down hills,
Okay. And then, so I'm curious too about, so we're talking about Reishi and Chaga, which are not something you could just chomp on or even cook down for dinner that night. But so would you consider things like morels and oysters and a lot of those that you find in the forest, would you consider all of those medicinal mushrooms?
You're pretty much always going to get the beta-glucans with those. Yeah.
Okay.
And then another thing with the beta-glucans, the fact that it's an adaptogen and helps our bodies respond to stress, stressful environments, and kind of helps our bodies achieve a state of homeostasis in the immune system and stress. So it's overall the human condition improver.
Yes. So
immune system booster and anti-inflammatory. Because many of our diseases and stuff like that are based out of stressors and inflammation. So particularly this day and age in capitalist America and with all the stresses and things that we're working with and the insults on our immune system that we get daily.
So mushrooms are basically here for us.
I like
But that being said, I do want to address the whole poisonous mushroom thing because I know a lot of people watching this, because we're going to talk about how you, foraging, because I know you know a lot about that and just, how that works and, how you know where to go and everything. Because we're in the Pacific Northwest, which is pretty easy this time of year and in fall to find
morels are going to be out
amazing
soon.
mushrooms.
I think just here, elevation 1300, and I start seeing the first flushes out here. So.
I want to go on a journey with you.
Yeah, let's do it.
But so let's talk about because I know people, I can hear them already asking, what about poisonous mushrooms? How do I know what I'm doing? So obviously you need a guide, I think, unless you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But so let's just address the poisonous ones, I guess.
Yeah.
And then there's only a few.
Yeah, it's always best to find that kind of trusted person to go out with. A lot of people out there are self-taught, but I'd recommend finding a mycologist group in your area. Start by looking on Facebook. In Oregon, there's multiple that cover the Bend area, and they'll do guided mushroom walks. There's a lot of really good guidebooks out there. If you're looking to get into foraging mushrooms for the first time, I highly recommend All That the Rain Promises and More. It's a really funny book, and it's written by one of the probably foremost experts on mushroom taxonomy, and it's really user-friendly, and it's got dichotomous keys on the front and back, so it's really easy. You just pick it up. It's does it have gills? Yes or no, and it's follow
it's probably this,
and then,
in this category.
Then it will take you to a series of pages.
Okay, and I'll put that in the show notes for people listening and watching. All That the Rain Promises and More. Great, because I know you have a ton of resources too. And
then also mushrooms. Once you start getting, that's kind of a little introductory one. Then also mushrooms demystified.
Oh, I like that. I mean, it says it all the time.
Yeah. That's a particularly thick book.
Okay.
It's going to add weight to your backpack in the woods, but it's well worth it.
So do you like the first one better than the second one?
The one's more of an introductory level.
Okay.
And then once you start, because you will get out there, you're going to be like, a mushroom, and then you're going to pull out your trusty
little
you're going to pull out All That the Rain Promises and More, and then you're going to realize that it's not in there.
Oh.
And then you're going to be like, Yeah. But that book will at least cover, you will encounter a lot of mushrooms that are in that book, of course, and it will get you to the edible and medicinal mushrooms, and even mushrooms that you can dye fabric and clothing with, but kind of the more popular hunted mushrooms. And then once you want to dive a little bit deeper, go ahead and get mushrooms demystified.
Okay, and I would definitely recommend getting the book because if you're thinking, I'll just get an app, half the time there's no service in these areas, which I love. We want to just get away from all of it anyway.
And then frequently for a true ID too, what you need is you'll
A
need
picture.
microscopic features like a spore print and spore print color and stuff like that,
Okay.
which you're not going to get with a photo. Or it's going to take multiple angles of the mushroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then also too to kind of address that, you know, the whole poisonous kind of thing too. It's like you just probably don't want to go out on your own.
Yes.
Like learn to like at least like see the, you know, what kind of shapes you're looking for. Like but overall I would say it's a lot easier than people might make it seem.
Right.
You know, like if you just went out in the woods to go pick morels and somebody said it's a brown wavy capped mushroom, you'll wind up in trouble. You know,
there's a lot of
because
those.
there's a lot of stuff like that. So if you just go and pick something like that, but once you get to know the morel,
Yeah, you have to
and you
see
know
a picture. You have to
shape,
eat one and touch one,
Yeah.
like go to the store and like.
it's pretty
Yeah.
easy after that point.
Yeah.
But as long as you start like do like a little bit of research with your your books and things like that, and there's a lot of good online resources. It's pretty easy.
Okay.
And you get a rapport with the mushroom and
Yeah.
stuff like that, and you start learning. Oh, you'll even start seeing environments. Oh, it just feels like
I feel like I'm
it
here.
feels
Yeah.
like they got to be here, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I'm thinking even as you're saying that, like I wouldn't just randomly eat a mushroom. So one, if you are out hunting on your own, like just bring them back and have someone check them before you cook anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other is really there
always
seems like
cook
there's
them
only a
deep.
handful that I see like it. So what happens here, which I love about living in the Pacific Northwest, is this time of year suddenly like places like Market of Choice and Locavore show up with all these mushrooms, but they're all very similar, like the lobster mushroom, the lion's, like there's a few that you would find outgrowing in the wild. It's not like there's a huge array of, I mean, maybe there is, but like of the typical ones that we're eating anyway that are pretty easy to spot, right?
Yeah, there's chanterelles,
Yeah.
and morels, and of course lion's mane. Yeah.
God, if I found a
Shiitake.
lion's mane in the wild, I would be so excited.
Yeah, let me know when you do.
Have you
I
found one?
have, yeah. Because let me know when you do, because I want to make a wild clone. So.
Oh, okay. You know how to do that. Yeah, so if you don't know what a lion's mane is, you got to look one up. But it's like this big white fluffy mushroom that looks like a big puff ball. Mm-hmm. And like I like to just kind of cook it down in either ghee or coconut oil with some little bit of onion or garlic, and it's just oh my god, it's the texture's amazing.
Yeah, it's almost like lobster or something. It's probably one of the most delicious mushrooms you can eat, and it's one of the most fascinating medicinal mushrooms.
It's just fascinating.
Yeah, it's our go-to neurological mushroom.
Right. So like when they talk about medicinal mushrooms being great for your brain, that's usually the one they're talking about. The lion's mane.
Lion's mane is probably the backbone of that. Repairing the myelin sheaths of our neurons, which can help with a large variety of conditions. A lot of variety of neurological conditions have their basis in, reduction of the myelin sheaths. So it's actually a great thing to take preventatively. And then also too, there's a lot of data suggesting that it helps with a lot of different varied and also pretty hard to treat neurological conditions as well.
Okay. So that I love, and then so I have a couple questions that I'm thinking of, so I'm sure other people are too, is difference between fresh and powdered, and then the difference between mycelium and fruiting bodies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In my personal opinion, like I was saying a little bit earlier, it's like mushrooms are always kind of a food component, and so the closer we can get to actually taking that mushroom as food and eating the whole thing is the most preferable. So a lot of the really cool data on lion's mane and things like dementias are actually done with study participants eating a pound of it a day in soup.
In soup, okay. So just throwing them raw into like a soup and
then cooking them down.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, but frequently it's hard to eat a pound of that a day in soup, so we are left to have to supplement. Right. And so then we enter our powders and our dry extract powders and our tinctures and stuff like that. Yeah. And then there's the whole mycelium versus fruiting body argument.
So can you just tell us the difference between the two?
Mm-hmm. So fruiting bodies are actually just an organ of the mushroom. They're not actually
that's the top fluffy part.
Yeah, it's like confusing a plant or a tree with just the leaf, if you will, or just the flower more specifically.
Okay.
Because the flower is actually a reproductive organ, as is the mushroom. looking at a flower and being like, oh, that must be all of the plant that exists. But the majority of the life of the fungus takes place in the mycelial stage. You can actually survive many, many, many years under the surface of the ground or in the matrix of a dead log or something like that. With like reishi trees blooming, they're flushing season after season after season. Or if you inoculate like a stump or a log with oysters, they can just flush season after season after season. You know, the fruiting bodies go and rot, but the mycelium stays in the tree.
Yeah, it just keeps living.
Yeah. So it's actually the most of the fungus, or the whole, is actually the mycelium. The whole heart of like what the fungus is the mycelium. Mycelium can take many different forms. It'll look different for every species. They'll all have their characteristic smell and everything, but usually it looks like some kind of mold or some kind of ropey kind of thing. We've all been walking through the woods and kicked open a log or flipped over a piece of tree bark and seen the ropey-like structures of that white stuff, and that's mushroom mycelium.
Okay. It's just everywhere.
It's everywhere. Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Yeah, I forget what they say, that like the thousands of miles that exist in 1 cubic centimeter, just because it's all hyperconnected.
Yeah. And if you're curious, like I know you and I went and saw it together, but Fantastic Fungi was such an amazing movie. And then you see that movie and you fall in love with mushrooms. Well, at least I did even more. And then you also see like what's actually happening in the forest and how much of our forest is just made of this.
Yeah.
But not to be afraid of, but like there's something miraculous happening in the world. Like it gives me hope for the world. Actually, mushrooms do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they solve a lot of our problems, a lot of our ecological problems. Just reworking with mushrooms can help us in a lot of ways. You know, whether it's our own health or the health of the planet. Yeah. But back to the mycelium versus fruiting body.
Yeah.
So mycelium of mushrooms can have all sorts of different beneficial compounds in them, and it can be taken medicinally. However, it's relatively hard to cultivate. It's easy to cultivate it, but it's hard to separate it from what you grow it on. And so, when you grow, if you're a cultivator and you want to grow either mushrooms or mycelium, to grow just mycelium is very easy, and you're going to yield many, many pounds. But if you then take that mycelium and then move it to a fruiting stage and then grow mushrooms off of it, that many, many pounds of potential yield is going to turn to maybe a few ounces, right? And so, and it's a whole extra step to go ahead and fruit the mycelium, right? Okay. So, in the U.S., that's very expensive. It takes way more time and it's way more labor to fruit it. But if you can sell the mycelium, then you're left with way more yields and way less work.
Because you don't have to wait for it to fruit.
You don't have to wait for it to fruit. It doesn't, you only need maybe one environment that has one certain range of temperatures. You don't have to control humidity. You can just grow it in bags. Yeah. And then you don't actually have to fruit it, which is bringing it to a whole nother environmentally controlled room. And then you take that maybe 5-pound bag, 10-pound bag, whatever it is, and then you go to fruit that, and you may only get if it's a 10-pound block, you may only get 1 pound off of that. But if you can process the mycelium into something that's sellable, then
right. But I'm hearing a lot in that, and the first thing that comes to my mind is nature didn't intend that. Like, if I was just a lowly human wandering through the forest, I wouldn't be like, let me dig in the dirt and start eating the little roots. But if I saw something fruiting, I would want that. Like, it instinctually and naturally, it's not right. It doesn't feel right.
Well, it's also not that, they may have picked it and seen a web of mycelium underneath that, but it's not, you can't separate it from the dirt or from the tree.
Yeah, it's not edible in that form.
Right. It's not necessarily edible in that.
Unless you're a bug.
Yeah. Data demonstrates that there are a lot of beneficial compounds in mycelium, but however, it's nearly impossible to separate from the substrate that you grow it on. So,
like rice.
Or what have you.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a hotbed topic. I feel like it's really kind of the U.S. that struggles with this right now. The mycelium versus fruiting body, and then some types of mycelium are shown to have more of a beneficial compound than maybe just the fruiting body. So a lot of folks are talking about some of the arenaceans and the lion's mane that are really good for neurogenesis and stuff like that. And high concentrations more so than the fruiting body. But the issue is when you sell all that material or you go and you dry it out, depending on the species of mushroom that you're working with, a lot of grain still winds up into the supplement by weight. And
So per capsule, you're getting maybe like a quarter of it is the actual mycelium, and the rest is just rice or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So from someone like me who gets inflamed from grains, then I'm like, why am I feeling inflamed? Because I'm taking all these medicinal mushroom caps.
Yeah, and so the majority of supplements on the market are going to be from mycelium. And so I'm not opposed to taking mycelium.
Right. Because at least it's something.
At least it's something. But it's also really important to look at what species you're doing that with. Like turkey tail, if you've ever seen turkey tail grow, I mean, it'll grow.
Pretty.
Yeah, it is pretty. It'll grow. It'll grow through some of our hardest woods in the forest. You know what I'm saying? And it'll just, and when you grow it in the farm environment, you realize it just plows through wood, it plows through paper, and then when you go and you break up the mycelium after that, it looks like hardly anything that it was originally on. You know what I'm saying? Because it does such a good job of digesting it all and turning it into mycelium. When it comes to something like cordyceps, the opposite is the case. It's a really, I don't want to say anemic because it's a really aggressive mycelium too, but it just does it in a different way. And so it'll grow over the grains or whatever you're growing it on. It doesn't grow as thoroughly into it.
So it'll just way more of a fruiting body.
Encase it and stuff like that. And then it'll put digestive enzymes into the material that it's growing off of and then extracting that. So it's kind of even like mycelium processed grain. That's why like the Stamets group.
So that one would be better, is what you're saying?
Because in my
worse.
Because when that gets dried out, and then you take a mycelium cake from cordyceps grow and look at it, it looks like it's pretty much nothing has even happened to that grain.
Yeah.
So when you go and you powderize that, it won't even be white like the mycelium. It'll be yellow like the millet, or it'll look like rice, or even. I recommend if you're getting the supplements, popping it open and seeing how it tastes. With a lot of supplements tasting straight up like rice, it doesn't even taste.
It's like rice flour.
Yeah, it shouldn't taste like that.
Yeah. And then so I want to talk about turkey tail too, but you're like, I consider you to be like a cordyceps expert.
Yeah, of course.
Because you've grown them, you grew them as a business, and you gave me some, and it was like 10 times more powerful than any other cordyceps I've had. And I was telling him, I was like, I was just taking, because I love to put medicinal mushrooms in my coffee. That's how I get every day, how I make sure I get it, because I hate popping pills. And so like I'll just put the powders in my coffee and blend it with my ghee or my coconut oil. And so the stuff you gave me was just so amazing. And so like I consider you an expert in that. So cordyceps has its own unique profile too, as far as like what you get from it.
Right. Yeah. And so it's really navigating what mushroom to get, what supplement to get, and then they're also, when you look at the labeling on packages, sometimes it'll still say mushrooms, but then you go and you can actually do very simple tests to figure out how much starch is in it, and you'll find out that a large percent of it is actually still starch because they're selling mycelium. Mm-hmm. So, or they'll even on the on the back, the nutritional facts, they'll say like chaga mushroom mycelium.
Okay, so you want to look for the word mycelium versus fruiting body. So,
you want it, exactly.
You want it to say fruiting body.
In my opinion, you want it to say fruiting body.
Okay, this is really good information, by the way.
Though, if you got like an oyster supplement, oyster's really good for cholesterol. It's not really marketed much for that, but it's mostly sold as a food. But or if you got like a turkey tail mycelium, that's more preferable. But it takes kind of cultivating it and breaking it apart and looking at it to really kind of like understand. So It's best, in my opinion, just to go for the fruiting bodies.
Okay.
And so they're going
Which
to
are more expensive.
They're going to be a lot more expensive.
You get what you pay for, though.
Yeah, you get what you pay for.
Yeah, and so we'll get into recommendations because I know like your website will be carrying them eventually, which is starseedfungi.com. We love providing medicinal mushrooms, and I'm just wanting to hear like a little bit more about like why you would buy which one. So, but we would be looking for fruiting bodies, and we would be paying more, but maybe taking less of it. Possibly. I know you like to take mega doses.
Yeah. And that's another thing is the whole marketing aspect of like, when a company looks at what a consumer is probably willing to pay, it's like the $1 a day mark or like standard is once you start pushing $1 a day, people are a lot less likely to buy that.
People will pay between $30 and I find for me anyway, $30 and $45 a month for something that provides a month's worth of supplements. Like you said, $1 a day, maybe a little like $1.50 a day. Yeah, but if you're getting up to 60 and $80 for a month, you're like, okay, I'm doing the math on that, and like if I'm doing that with 4 different mushrooms, and
Yeah. That being said, I feel like I'm worth it.
I know. Like, what else are you gonna spend your money on?
Yeah, exactly. But also that so sometimes we go through and we look at when you go and you look at the serving sizes as well. It's usually about 500 milligrams to a gram, and depending on the species of mushroom, when you start combing through the data and you start realizing what these study participants are taking, they're taking far more than what. So it's even just by going by the serving size.
Because 3 grams is about a tablespoon, correct? Usually it's about 3 teaspoons. So that's kind of a lot. Like you'd have to take a lot of capsules.
Yeah, you gotta take a lot.
I think we did the math. It was 20 capsules is 1 tablespoon. So there you go.
And also like my cordyceps that I grew, like when you saw those and looked at those, it's like a brown, a really deep brown orange. Because it was really really dense.
Yes.
If I had a better blender, I could suspend that better, and the color would lighten out. But so then the volume's going to be greater, but it's going to be lighter. When the cordyceps, we were taking a very small amount actually. Wrong in higher
because it's so
concentrated. Because it's very concentrated. So a lot
what are
of
the benefits of the cordyceps? Since we're talking about cordyceps.
So a lot of data demonstrates that it's first off, it's a beta-glucan powerhouse. Next, it's got a chemical called cordycepin in it, named after the cordyceps mushroom, obviously. But it is a athletic. Let's put it this way. It's really good for our cardiovascular systems and pulmonary systems. So it's been popularly taken recently for athletic performance. It's been
before or after?
I take it before.
Okay.
Yeah, I take it daily. So I take it daily in the morning. So it's kind of like a natural pre-workout.
Yes.
Cordycepin is also very closely related in structure to adenosine and caffeine.
That's why I get so much energy.
And so it will give you, depending on your body and everything like that. I'm not sensitive to caffeine. I can drink it all day and barely feel it.
You sit next to me and I'm like, how much coffee did you put in that? 20 grams.
Almost enough. So it will. So a sensitive person can take it and feel very much energized. I know a lot of the night nurses that I worked with when I was growing, and a lot of the night nurses love taking it.
Yeah, because it doesn't give you the jitters like caffeine would.
Right. I never felt the cordyceps too much. Sometimes I did. Really kind of like energetic, sensitive people too. It can really give them a feel pretty jazzed.
But I would like to experiment with that, just like I did, because the only reason I took so much of your Reishi and Chaga is because you have these 2, one of those 8-ounce jars, and I'm like, okay, I took a scoop. Take a lot. With the cordyceps, I was being stingy because I wanted to keep it because I know it's like expensive and it's concentrated. So, but I would love to do an experiment where I took like the proper amount and saw what happened.
Yeah, and it's you want to go by there's data out there. There's lots of good data, and more coming in every day.
Yeah,
and they go through dosing right on the front. Like our study participants are taking this much.
Yeah.
And
Can you take too much?
Generally, I don't think.
Well, other than like you feel it in your system.
Yeah, I don't. It's considered like a food, and it's really not too much. Is unsafe.
Yeah.
And then so the cordyceps is commonly taken for athletic performance, It really helps with oxygenating the blood. So a lot of sometimes folks that have got impaired systems that way, or they got low O2 sats, that kind of thing, or heart failure. It's done a lot of good work for them.
Yeah.
It helps rebuild our lungs. And so I it's funny because I started growing cordyceps, and then here comes COVID.
Yeah.
And here
it's
an amazing, again, it's also an amazing antiviral.
Yeah.
And immune system booster, and it's all, COVID's of course in our lungs, attacks our lungs, and so it's like,
talk about being tapped in.
Yeah. So I was thinking that. I personally feel, and of course this is just my intuition, to be considered a grain of salt. But I really felt like particularly the cordyceps did me a lot of good at work.
Because you never tested positive, and you've been exposed to so many people just from work, and like you were actually going to places like as a, I forget what you called it, but like they would call you in as a nurse for being in that ward.
Yeah, my last contract was emergency scheduling for COVID relief down in the Bay Area.
And never a symptom of anything.
Never.
Not even a sniffle. Well, I know you also have a really clean diet and like all that stuff too. But I really think if you, in our Bend community, we call him Mushroom Michael. that's like,
I'm saving a few phones as Mushroom Mike. But classically the Chinese took it as an aphrodisiac, men's health, fertility. It increases, sperm motility as well as egg motility. So
great fertility then,
it's been taken a lot for fertility, it's a very potent anti-cancer, anti-tumor. It's really just a fantastic mushroom.
Yeah.
That's really now for the first time in the history of the human race becoming available to the general public, because it has been when the Chinese were first doing their, developing their pharmacopoeia on it and checking it out through their thousands of years of herbalism and stuff like that. It was growing off caterpillars in the high Himalaya.
Through the ant heads too, right?
Yeah. Well, the species that was taken medicinally was off caterpillar silkworms.
Right.
And so data suggests that you want to take 10 grams of that particular mushroom a day.
Yeah.
And so every one of those fruiting bodies has to grow off one caterpillar, and that's dispersed over the high, mountains.
They didn't want the world to know about that.
And so it takes a person to go through scaling these hills and everything and picking these little things. So it would cost $22,000 to $25,000 a kilo for it. And so, but in recent history, along comes a different species of cordyceps militaris. The first one I was talking about is Ophiocordyceps sinensis. We now have Cordyceps militaris, which is 10 times stronger and can actually be cultivated. Ophiocordyceps sinensis hasn't responded to cultivation until I think like last year. There's a Chinese scientist that did it.
Plus, for the vegans out there, they don't have to feel bad about eating a mushroom that killed a caterpillar.
Yeah. So you can flush large amounts of it on. I like to use millet.
Okay.
But,
so like I've seen pictures, but I've also visited where you were growing it, and it's just like they're these like little orange wormy looking things, and they're so beautiful.
Yeah, like alien Cheetos.
Yeah. But there's really a lot of technique that goes into growing these, which is why I consider you like an expert, and you actually show other people how to, if they want to do a business, like how to do it too.
It grows very uniquely different genetically. It's far different than maybe a mushroom that produces a standard fruiting body.
Mm-hmm.
And genetically, it's far different. And so the mycelium behaves in a far different way. And so really kind of figuring out a commercially viable method was kind of really figuring out how to shepherd that mycelium the best.
Yeah.
But growth parameters are totally different. Fruiting methods are totally different.
Temperatures too?
Temperatures, it's very much a cold liking mushroom, relatively. Still room temp.
Along comes
60 to 65, is the fruiting range for that mushroom. Yeah, and it's just a fascinating one. And so also, I forget if I mentioned it earlier, but it's 10 times more potent than Ophiocordyceps
Right.
sinensis.
From the caterpillar cordyceps.
Yeah, with
We'll just call it that.
So with
Wow.
when taking in
So
the
so then
levels.
10 times less. So instead of having to take the, did you say 10 grams?
Yeah.
Which would be a little more than 3 tablespoons. If it's 10 times more powerful, then a teaspoon is plenty, right? I was taking like
With
a
mine,
quarter
it was
teaspoon
a
of
quarter,
yours.
Yeah, because it was really dense, and that's on my
Yeah.
old labels. That's what it said, between a quarter and an eighth of a teaspoon.
And when
That's what
if you ever grow them again, if I can get some like yours again, I'm going to experiment with more. I'm just going to splurge on one bag and just see what happens.
Yeah, I was taking like 2 grams there.
Yeah. The benefit of growing them yourself.
Yeah. I like, exactly. But a lot of the data that I like that I've combed through on that suggests, or their study participants were taking about a gram of melatonin.
Gram is a third of a teaspoon.
Yeah.
I'm just using this like salt, so 3 teaspoons of salt is a gram.
Ophiocordyceps sinensis.
10, okay.
But and then also with mushroom costing that much, there's a lot of people want to fudge the numbers and do unethical things with it.
And use mycelium and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so the mycelium actually of Ophiocordyceps sinensis is easy to grow, but the fruiting body has been next to impossible to get. I think in the last year, some scientists in China did come out as having successfully cultivated it, which is new.
Yeah.
And then, but folks would take little slivers of lead and hide it into the fruiting bodies to make their bags weigh more.
Oh no! And there's always going to be that, right?
Yeah. And so there's lead and stuff like that getting processed.
You got to know your source.
You got to know your source.
And that's why, like, I really trust. Like, so we're always asking, or I'm always asking you, like, what source do you like? What source do you use? And so I'll put that in the show notes, and like, you will be eventually providing them on your website, I know. And also, I love that you teach people how to do it the right way. Like, if someone wanted to start a business, and I know you've got some people that are like, hey, I want to put things in my chocolates or whatever, that you're actually like helping to do it the right way. And I think it's so important because.
And then also, if anyone's interested in cultivating, I can help with that too, and help consult a variety of grows depending on your space and your needs and stuff like that.
Yeah. And then, so what about, you mentioned turkey tail briefly. I know that one's super good at anti-cancer.
Yep, anti-cancer.
And that one's really strong, so it makes sense, right?
Yeah. It's also important to delineate, too, that a lot of the research on turkey tail is also in conjunction with chemotherapy.
Okay.
And so as
so
an adjunct to
Yeah.
chemotherapy, and actually in Japan, it's very commonly given. It's you wind up on chemo, you wind up with a turkey tail prescription. It improves patient outcomes. And not so much because it's an anti-cancer component or anti-tumor component. I think a lot of people get confused and think, it's attacking the cancer, and that may or may not be the case depending on the type of cancer that you have. But it is bolstering our immune systems.
And anti-inflammatory.
Yeah, exactly. Because chemo destroys our immune systems.
Yes.
It just a condition called neutropenia, you're left with next to no immune system. But when you take the turkey tail, it helps bolster our killer T cell numbers, neutrophils and all that, and helps rebuild our immune system after the insult of chemo. So those patients don't go as neutropenic, and they're left to the buffer, and it's pretty clear that that's helped improve patient outcomes.
So it sounds like, and I know this from chemo, you're not taking it during chemo because it would just be counteracting the chemo, but you're taking it during the off time. So it's like on with chemo, off with, doesn't matter. People can look that up.
Yeah,
but it comes to mind, it makes me wonder what the difference is then, because you did say that Reishi and Chaga also bolster immune systems. So what makes turkey tail unique?
I think it's, I'm not 100% on that.
Yeah, but just probably the different profile.
Yeah, I'd have to review that again. Yeah, but there's unique chemistry associated with the turkey tail, and then of course the beta-glucans in that as well.
Exactly. Well, I mean, I'm even thinking of the story that I know that Paul Stamets told about his mother, who had really enlarged. She had breast cancer, but she was so huge and inflamed. So a lot of the turkey tail helped with that, because he said he was giving her 5 caps a day or 8 caps a day, anyway. And it helped. Nothing else was helping, and the breast cancer finally went away and the inflammation went away. But I'm thinking the anti-inflammatory properties are so important with that.
Yeah, I believe she was also on a regimen of chemo too.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool. This is just so much information. I want to have you on as a regular guest because there's just so much information to talk about and share.
Sure.
So I would love for everybody to know your website again, and then anything you want to share, like if someone were to just get started, like, okay, I've listened to this and I've heard about, all these different mushrooms, like, I don't want to spend $300 buying them all. Like, well, what do you say, like, the first good place to start and, like, what to look for as far as, like, what's going to changes in your body that you might just, like, do you notice anything?
Oh, like when you take it? What you
yeah,
feel?
like if you started on a regimen.
So it's sometimes when we introduce something new to our bodies, like we can shock our bodies a little bit. So even if you go mushroom picking and you go out in the woods, you find all these cool different types of mushrooms, and then you start eating a whole bunch. Say you just crush chanterelles or something like that, and then you bring them back to the house and you start chopping them up, and you're just eating like pounds every day. You know what I'm saying? Even just taking that amount of something new has provided GI discomfort on people. So if you notice something like that, just start low, go slow, build up to the dose that you've decided that you want to take. Yeah.
Start slow. There's no rush, right?
Yeah, no rush.
Yeah.
And then, so sometimes when you first get on a regimen, or you even like take a break for a little bit, just because you run out or what have you, you start it again. You can kind of, your body knows there's something going on.
Something's different.
Yeah. But you quickly get used to it. But particularly with cordyceps, you'll notice like more energy, more more focus, more productivity. I just know, particularly with reishi, is a good mood mushroom. So anxiety.
This helps calm the nervous system.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah.
Wow. So maybe reishi and cordyceps. Cordyceps is a good two to start with.
Yeah.
Just for fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't take cordyceps at night, though, right?
I would avoid it. But like just because I haven't heard of too many people.
I haven't either.
I've heard one actually.
But I don't want to be laying in bed going,
me?
whoa.
Yeah, exactly. Cordyceps generally I can take it in the morning.
Yeah. And I like to put, I love to experiment with chocolate because I'm a chef. So I like to put like the powders in my chocolates.
Yeah, it's actually
because chocolate is also and coffee are great administers because it opens up your receptors, right? I would say coffee and chocolate are both really good ways to enjoy mushrooms. I don't even taste the mushrooms in the coffee.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess some of the highlights: mycelium versus fruiting body.
Yes.
I think it's fairly well established. You want to go with the fruiting bodies, depending on the species of mushroom or what have you. When selecting a product, they're usually going to be right up front with you. It's like, we're selling fruiting bodies. They
want you to know. It's like organic. It's big on the label. If it's not on there, it's not.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also too, there's a way of different varieties in which they test how much grain is present in there. And then also just be sure to do your own research and make sure that you're getting a therapeutic amount of that particular mushroom.
Okay, and then I guess another question before we close: Chinese versus American grown. I guess you kind of said it in the interview, which is the Chinese ones have more integrity or no?
So this is kind of another hotbed kind of thing because a lot of the folks in the U.S. that want to sell the mycelium are saying don't buy anything from China because it's tainted with heavy metals. And then also there's a major ethical issue. They've done genetic assays of supplements brought from Asia, and it contains no genetic code of that material. Wow. So God only knows what was in it.
The heck?
Yeah. And then that's
called food fraud.
Yeah. And then the way that USDA organic labeling works over here and works over in China, they pretty much get a free pass for.
Yeah, that's true. Everything out of country gets a free pass on organic usually.
Yeah. So is it even organic? Depending on this type of mushrooms, it's pretty well demonstrated. Mushrooms will concentrate things like heavy metals into their tissue. Or
non-organic rice if it's grown on pesticide-laden rice.
Yeah. Sometimes mushrooms will transmute those chemicals, and other times they won't. It just depends on the chemical, depends on the species of mushroom. Heavy metals generally get concentrated in mushrooms, and so if that area or any of the substrate is tainted with heavy metals, which unfortunately, China has
Well,
problems.
the air has heavy metals too.
Yeah, exactly. Then you could be concentrating that. You know, again, I don't think
know your source.
Yeah,
yes.
I don't think anyone's really putting lead in cordyceps anymore, but it was a thing for a little bit. But
hopefully inspections have gotten better.
Yeah, so it's really a good idea to go and vet your farm to like
talk to the find out.
Exactly, find out, look for sourcing, and just do your best to make sure that it is like a good organic farm and that they are doing it in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And then I've got no problem getting mushrooms from China, depending on the source. But I mean, if you're just hopping on Amazon, shopping bottom dollar, it's probably Chinese and it's probably mycelium.
So know the mushroom company that you're buying from.
Yeah, next to no medicinal value. Telling you that. That's one of the biggest travesties. I think it's like there's a resurgence in this. Mushrooms can help save the world. They're really good for us, but a lot of the products on the market are just not there.
Yeah. So if someone wanted to buy some mushrooms today, like before your amazing ones come out, where would you? Realmushrooms.com,
which is Jeff Chilton's company.
Yeah, Jeff Chilton.
I know that you've worked.
I interviewed him before, and he's amazing, and that's the ones I use too.
Yeah, hands down.
Yeah. What's that?
And, this is a really cool book. I know because I was talking a little bit. It's a really good idea to get to start with. Figure out how much of it you want to take. This is the book that I like to use. It's called Medicinal Mushrooms: A Clinical Guide.
Okay, Medicinal Mushrooms, A Clinical Guide. I'll link that in the notes too for those of you on the podcast.
It's just.
Does it have pictures too?
Oh yeah.
Ooh,
it's
baby.
just a
nice. Yeah, color photos.
Yeah, it's easy to read.
And
breaks everything down.
Okay.
So that's a good.
Well, that's actually even though I've talked to you so much about mushrooms, I've learned a ton today, and one of them is just to get one of these guidebooks because I'm always like, how do I know?
Yeah.
So I've been in the forest and seen things with gills hanging off the side of the tree, and people are like, "Is that a turkey tail?" I'm like, I don't think so, but I have no idea. So good to know.
And there's turkey tails, and I think all false turkey tail, and all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, cool. Thanks so much for being on. And again, starseedfungi.com, and on there you can find his internet link. And is there any other way you want him to give him your email too, just in case?
Yeah,
people want to work with you.
Starseedfungi@gmail.com. Any questions?
Starseedfungi@gmail.com.
Yeah, I can help consult bros, anything like that you want to do.
Yeah, you need help because if you're trying to grow your own mushrooms in your garage, it's not as easy as it seems. You got to know what you're doing.
It's easy to do, but it's easier to mess up.
Totally. And because my friend was growing some, and it's like he comes in and goes, "Oh, you got to do this, you got to change that." Like, make it easy and save yourself a lot of time and money too. Well, thanks, Michael.
Yeah,
we'll be back with
thanks for having
more
me.
episodes with Michael.
Yeah.
Mushroom Michael.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for joining. We'll see you guys next time.